Viewer guidance is strongly advised. The following content is intended purely for informational and entertainment purposes only. The courtroom fell into absolute silence as Will Smith, one of Hollywood's most respected figures, stepped forward to testify. No one had expected it. For years, he had stayed far away from controversy, carefully guarding his reputation. But today, he made a decision that shook the entire entertainment world. He was here, not as a movie star or celebrity, but as a man who could no longer stay silent about what he had witnessed behind the closed doors of the industry. For weeks, testimonies had painted a chilling picture of what went on inside Diddy's empire, but the arrival of Will Smith changed everything. His words carried the weight of decades of experience. He had nothing to gain, no vendetta to settle, and that made his testimony all the more powerful. He began by recalling how he first crossed paths with Diddy in the 90s. At the time, both were carving out their names in the industry, Smith in family-friendly blockbusters and Diddy in the music scene. Their interactions had been cordial, mostly at events or collaborative meetings. But over time, Smith started noticing patterns, disturbing ones. He described lavish parties disguised as networking events, where young, ambitious talents were lured with promises of success. But what really happened inside those venues was far from glamorous. Will explained how he had observed carefully planned recruitment tactics that specifically targeted vulnerable individuals, those without strong support systems or financial security. These individuals were isolated, emotionally and socially. They were offered opportunities that seemed too good to be true. Gradually, they were drawn into a world that became harder to escape with each passing day. Smith testified that the events were meticulously documented, not for memories or marketing, but for control. High-end cameras and staff ensured that compromising moments were captured and stored. This footage became a tool of manipulation. Those who wanted to walk away feared what might be revealed if they did. Financial contracts were another weapon. Will outlined how Diddy's organization structured deals in a way that stripped individuals of their independence. They were made to rely on the organization for basic needs, housing, food, even travel. Leaving wasn't just a career risk, it meant economic collapse. But it wasn't just money. Smith spoke of psychological tactics. People were praised, then torn down. They were manipulated into believing they had no worth outside the system. Surveillance was constant. Phones monitored, locations tracked, friendships controlled. He talked about how substances were introduced, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly, creating dependencies that made people easier to control. Those who resisted faced isolation, threats, or were simply replaced. What stunned the court most was Smith's account of how the entire system was protected, not just by enablers within the organization, but by corrupt external contacts. Business partners, law enforcement, even legal professionals were either compromised or unwilling to confront the machine. It wasn't just a few bad parties, it was a fully operational criminal enterprise. Smith revealed that for years he kept his distance. He chose to walk the fine line, staying out of trouble while quietly observing. But the more he saw, the heavier the burden became. And when he watched young artists, some who reminded him of his own children, being exploited, he knew he had to speak. His voice cracked when he described the guilt of staying silent for so long. He admitted that his career had given him the privilege to walk away, but most others didn't have that luxury. They were trapped. He looked across the courtroom, directly at Diddy, and addressed him without fear. He spoke of the years he watched Diddy rise to power, using charm and influence to build an empire, only to abuse that power for control and exploitation. He didn't just condemn the actions, he challenged the entire industry, an industry that had enabled this behavior through silence and loyalty. He stated firmly that loyalty to colleagues could never come before justice for victims. He called out the culture that rewarded silence, that protected power at the expense of the vulnerable. And he made it clear that his decision to testify was not just about Diddy. It was about breaking a cycle, one where speaking the truth meant losing everything, and staying silent meant becoming complicit. The courtroom hung on every word. Even seasoned prosecutors admitted later that they had never seen such a compelling testimony. Diddy, once composed and confident, was visibly shaken. What followed was even more shocking. Smith's testimony inspired others. Witnesses who had refused to speak out before began reaching out to authorities. Victims started feeling believed. And the entertainment industry, long used to covering its sins with glitter, found itself under a harsh, unforgiving light. Behind the scenes, major studios launched internal reviews. Public statements were issued promising reform. Social media exploded with support for Smith, hailing him not just as an actor, but as a leader who made a stand, even when it could be professionally suicidal. Advocacy groups praised his bravery, calling it a turning point in the fight for accountability. Even those who had previously doubted the extent of the claims found themselves moved by the sheer depth of Smith's knowledge, his clarity, and his courage. Legal experts declared his testimony historic, not just for the content, but for what it represented, a public figure using his platform to demand justice, even at a personal cost. Smith didn't stop there. He spoke to the media afterward, urging others in the industry to come forward. He said the time for protecting predators was over. The time for transparency and justice had come. He ended his testimony by saying that if even one person was spared from exploitation because of his words, it would be worth it. That the entertainment industry didn't need more stars. It needed more truth. And in that moment, Will Smith became more than an actor. He became a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of the change the industry so desperately needed. And as he walked out of the courtroom, the silence was replaced by murmurs of disbelief, respect, and a sense that something significant had shifted. Because when one of Hollywood's biggest names chooses truth over silence, it sends a message that cannot be ignored.